we hear criticisms that the Western media is too negative about this.
We have USAID just launched their campaign Forward. FWD, famine, war, and drought.
Essential. Africa was a country on the brink of complete meltdown and chaos.
So you're from Africa.
I am an African man.
But do you know who we are?
This is what you might think of us.
Machine guns.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Talha, and I was brought up in Uganda, which is in East Africa. The topic of my digital story is about the misrepresentation of Africa in the international media through photography. First of all, the reason why I chose this topic is because I am interested in how Africans are shown and what kind of image we have of Africa and outside Africa. When I came to the UK, I became more aware of the assumptions that people in the West make about Africa. For example, political problems, poverty, and illness. Not only that, when I started university, my fellow classmates asked me if I had lions at my backyard or traveled on an elephant to school, and so on. Maybe for them it was just a joke, but I took it serious, and this forced me to choose the topic. On the other side, I also wondered what could be the solution on how Africa is portrayed. In my digital story, I'm going to discuss how Africa is shown from the outside world and the people from Africa and their experiences can be represented from different points of views through photography. As I went on, my idea was to research and look at photographers who were interested in photographing the Africans. After looking at a few photographers, I noticed there were those who looked at Africa in a positive way and those who portrayed the continent in a negative manner. As Africa is now a country and is a continent, the research would be too broad, so I selected specific countries for the thesis. Having collected some information on the photographers, this wasn't enough for my topic. So I went on and planned to select my methods of research. One of the best methods to collect the data for the topic was to do the in-depth interviews with the local people in Uganda. The reason why I have chosen the in-depth interview is because I can gain his or her own point of view and insight into a complex issue like the one of Africa. However, I can also use the visual methods to complete my research. As my research is based on the portrayal of Africa through photography, my interest is to look at different photographers and how they tell their stories about Africa. Please note, as for now, I am using 3 photographers as an example for my digital story. The first photographer I would talk about is called Steve Bloom. He's one of my favorite and I am really inspired by his work. Steve Bloom specializes in wildlife, but also documents the tribes in Africa. His latest work called Living Africa brings the beauty of Africa under one project. I personally believe his work brings a tribute and appreciation to the tribes found in Africa. For me, to tell the story, the composition of an image matters. This means it's up to the photographer to what to exclude and include. Supporting Steve Bloom's project, I also looked at George Rogers' work. He disagreed how East Africa was represented in the media. George Rogers, who had gone to Africa 15 times, in Tanzania he covered the disastrous British groundnut scheme, as well as the enormously rich Williamson diamond mine. He also spent 6 weeks in the mountains of the Kordofan province in southern Sudan. George Rogers found the Africans strange, fascinating, and likable. But on the other side, photojournalists like Radhika Chalasani documented the drought in Sudan and communities affected with AIDS in my home country, Uganda. My style of working is by using black and white. Many photographers agree to work with black and white, because it eliminates the variations provided by the color in the original scene. South African photographer Zevelethu Mathilwa argues that when you look at people that are poor, if you shoot them in black and white, you're not doing them any favor. You are making the situation worse. They feel morbid because it is the nature of black and white. At this point, I could relate to David Campbell's theory of photo manipulation, where he argues that the photographer selects on how to frame the subject to tell a story. I then went on and did an interview with Justin, who was from Africa. He's one of my classmates in the media and communication department, and I questioned him how he would portray Africa in the international media. He then replied by saying, if I had given him a chance to portray Africa in the international media, he would say, Africa is a beautiful place. Besides the greens, beside the roses, be it yellow, white, red, besides the natural habitation of Africa, Africa has life. Africa is strong. Africa is ground of whatever potential you have. Africa is welcoming. Africa is home to everyone, and Africa is innovative. That is kind of way of projecting Africa in the international media. This was very clear Africans wanted to see their continent in a different light. It also reminded me of where Edward Said's Orientalism had shown how the culture apparatus is used to create a narrative surrounding the Middle East, portraying the realm's inhabitants as feminine, primitive, and backward. Ideas are currently produced which show Africa in a similar way. Somewhere I believe the international media portrays Africa in such a manner because the audience itself is interested in seeing it. For the thesis, I will show both sides of Africa, but I would prefer to show it in a better way, although the issue of Africa is a complex one, and there is always a personal opinion on it. Thank you for watching my digital story.